I prefer God over coincidence.
It's very humbling,
right.
I think, too. And then from there, it was when I was 19, I had my spiritual awakening. I kind of have this experience as though I'm being taken to another dimension. Like, I just gonna go, and suddenly, like, everything's black.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Good Trip Podcast. This is a 10-part series of conversations with leaders from the fields of entertainment, medicine, business, and beyond, all sharing their own unique experiences and perspectives towards psychedelics. And this week's episode was super fun because Jordan River stopped by. Jordan River is the creator of the Spirit Science YouTube channel. This is a YouTube channel that I've been following for the past couple of years, and I was super excited to get the chance to sit down with Jordan. Before I go into all of that, I also want to let y'all know that I got a lot of shows coming up this spring and summer. I'm doing the Irvine Improv on Thursday, April 13th. I'll be out at UC Santa Barbara, my alma mater, performing at Embarcadero Hall on April 22nd. And then I'm out in Pasadena at the Ice House on May 12th. Up in San Francisco at the Setup on May 6th, High Vibe Festival on May 7th up in Northern California, and I'm taping my debut comedy special May 19th and 20th in San Diego, California. So if any of y'all are around San Diego, or if you feel like coming out to California to see just how crazy shit gets out there, San Diego is going to be the spot. Mic Drop Comedy Club on May 19th through 20th, taping 4 shows that weekend. It's going to be insane. It will be a trip, for sure, without the drugs, but you can do them if you want. I don't condemn or condone taking psychedelics and coming to my comedy shows because it'll either make it way better or way wilder. Either way, tickets are up at brentpella.com/shows. And this episode of the podcast was super cool because Jordan River is a mutual friend of one of my good friends, Nate Stein, Equanimous. He was on an earlier episode of the show. And I've been watching Jordan's channel for years. Spirit Science, you might recognize the lead character Patchman as Jordan's kind of spokesman of the channel. And he goes into all types of topics on that YouTube channel. It's really incredible, from the flower of life to the Anunnaki to psychedelics to breath work and all these other amazingly deep topics, all with the intention of furthering your own wellness, your own spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, mental wellness, and so much more. Jordan stopped by to share a bit about the early days of the YouTube channel, how psychedelics kind of inspired his own growth creatively and his own personal growth, and so much more. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Doc Parsley's Sleep Remedy. Now, I travel across the country doing stand-up shows at night on all different sides of America, the East Coast, the West Coast, the Middle West, Middle East, all the different places. So my body is always trying to get used to different time zones, which means my rest and my recovery and my sleep is constantly being affected. That's why I bring Doc Parsley's Sleep Remedy with me on the road, because it helps me ease into sleep with its natural ingredients, including L-tryptophan, magnesium, and other key compounds that can help your body ease into a relaxed state and assist in you waking up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the next day. It comes in tea bag form or capsule form, so if you don't like drinking a bunch of water late at night, get the capsules. And cruise over to docparsley.com/Brent to learn more about my favorite sleep supplement and get a discount on your order. And this episode of the podcast also brought to you by Odyssey. Odyssey is a sparkling energy drink with 85 milligrams of caffeine from green tea. That's roughly the same amount of caffeine that you get in a cup of coffee. However, in my own personal experience, the caffeine from green tea that's put into these Odyssey sparkling elixir tonics does not give me the jitters and the anxiety that caffeine usually does when I'm chugging a bunch of coffee. Odyssey is also made with 2,500 milligrams of mushrooms, not magic mushrooms, not yet anyways, as you might find out when I talk to the CEO of Odyssey, Scott Froman, a little bit later in the Good Trip podcast series. This energy drink has lion's mane and cordyceps, designed specifically to free your mind, stimulate your mind, and give you a smooth energy that can last you through the day. You can find Odyssey in a whole bunch of stores if you head to odysseyelixir.com. Also, check out Amazon. because they ship through Amazon. So you can get Odyssey delivered directly to your door. Incorporate Odyssey into your life to get a swift boost of energy, and your life might just become an Odyssey. How fun is that? And now, please enjoy this uninterrupted trip with Jordan River.
And I think this is probably true for anyone. One spiritual awakening is not, you can't really claim it as your own.
Right.
So much as it is the accumulation of knowledge and wisdom and inspiration from all the different things that have ever happened in your life, which come together within yourself and your heart and your mind, that create a sense of unity or purpose or understanding that leads you to evolve in your consciousness and become a better person.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we are. I mean, on a human level too. Don't we just take things that we see and experience in our environment and just reuse those to create who we are? Absolutely. And the way we interact with the world? Yeah. So you were animating since when? You were a kid?
I was 12.
You were 12 when you started. What were some of the first things you were drawing?
First thing I did was a stick figure fight on the side of a dictionary.
Awesome.
I spent most of grade 6, I'm 12 years old, most of grade 6 burning through dictionaries.
Really?
And the teacher would be like, and so this is how you multiply 6 by 12. And I would be there in the class just doing like stick figure, next page, and putting together this like...
Oh yeah, like a flip book.
I started getting really creative and like using pencil crayons and getting colors in there so that when the stick figure got stabbed, there'd be all the red blood, and then the alien ship would come down off the top corner. And
wow,
really elaborate. And I had like this much space to work with.
Yeah, like an inch of page edges. Yeah,
exactly.
What inspired that? Were you just a creative kid? Did you grow up like around any artists in your family or anything?
Not really. I think it must have been TV. I mean, I grew up loving cartoons and animation, and a Sailor Moon was the first anime that I ever saw, and then Dragon Ball and Pokemon and Digimon and all those shows. So I think I just had an affinity for animation, and when I realized I could do it myself, despite even in such a simplified manner, it was just really appealing. Like, I like to think maybe the divine mind was working through me in a way, because by the inspiration itself, if I hadn't had that inspiration, spirit science wouldn't exist today.
Right.
And we could describe it in this way. Of course, there's many different ways of saying it, but you could say, if you're more on the spiritual side, that God was kind of working through me, had a plan for me, had this whole vision, but had to get me learning how to make cartoons early on so that I would be ready to go by the time that my spiritual awakening came around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or you could also look at it and just say, wow, it's a string of coincidences and synchronicities that led to the creation of this thing in the future that would help people.
Well, the former sure sounds cooler. I prefer God over coincidence.
It's very humbling, I think, too, because then it's both humbling and it takes humility. And I think this is true for anyone, to acknowledge, that it's not. Yeah, just to claim ownership over everything that you've done and not acknowledge anybody else. As it is said, those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who humble themselves will be exalted.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to just give it all to God, give it all to Spirit, and say, glory to God. I have no idea what the plan is even for me. And every day I'm just doing my best to walk in the path and let Him write His story through me, because He can make a much better story than I ever could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had no idea when you were 12 drawing stick figures killing each other where that was going either. Isn't that cool? You could start doing something that you're interested in at a young age, and it turns into an entire career and a life. But in that age, your sense of innocence and your lack of awareness is like your greatest gift, because your lack of awareness doesn't allow you to get lost in the what's this going to become sensation, right? And the thinking of like, what's the future of this? What is it even worth drawing this stuff? Like, no, you're just in the moment drawing bloody stick figures on the side of a dictionary, having an awesome time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's super cool.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Did you watch what were other cartoons you watched? There's a lot of anime in there. Did you ever watch other like Saturday morning cartoons?
Oh,
like
yeah,
Recess?
Recess, Weekenders,
Pepper Ann.
Maybe not so much of that.
What about Monsters Inc. or Avril Monsters was big.
Being in Canada, there's
that's right.
There's a bit of a crossover, because a lot of the shows I remember would always have that like made in Toronto or have the little Canada symbol.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. And what part of Canada did you grow up in?
Manitoba. Yeah, kind of smack in the middle of flatland.
Yeah.
Slurpee capital of the world.
Is that really what it is?
Yeah. There's some weird obsession, I think, that the Manitobans or the Winnipeggers have with Slurpees.
Really?
I don't know if we're still the capital. I think so. But like there was this whole thing of, it gets to be like minus 30 Celsius, minus 40 in the middle of the winter sometimes. And yet still we're like, it's minus 40. Let's go get a frozen drink.
Insane.
Because if we don't, we're going to lose our title.
And isn't that 7-Eleven has a Slurpee?
Yep,
that's what it is, right?
7-Eleven, yeah.
That's so funny, dude.
Yeah, and then if we're 7-Eleven, would put it up all on the billboards. Hey, Winnipeg, congratulations, Slurpee capital. And people are like, let's go get, that just spurs more sales.
Wow, that's wild. So you got Slurpees as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
What was ours? We got tacos from Del Taco. Yeah, which is like, I mean, looking back now, that like to me now that's like poison. That's gross. Like a fast food taco from Del Taco.
Yeah.
But back then, I remember in high school, we would get like 30 for 3 of us, and it was such a different, like approach to like life. And now I just treat my body with love and care. But back then, it was like, yeah, we're 16, we'll live forever. We're chilling.
Things really change when you grow up. You get some new perspectives, maturity, and you start to age and you realize, wait a second, I can prolong my life a little bit if I treat my body well.
Yeah.
But I don't know that everybody always has that thought as well. Some people just McDonald's when they're 60s and they're like, that's great.
Yeah.
It works for them.
And you get in that routine and it's a pattern of life. Mm-hmm. So you stick figure drawings on the side of dictionaries. What was the next phase after that?
Then I learned that I could do it on a computer.
Okay.
And so I was 13 and I had just started a new school, junior high school. And there was a Mac lab, which was filled with the 1984 Macintosh computers, like the old of the original Macintoshes. Yeah. So we and by we, I mean one friend and I realized we could make cartoons using, I guess, their original version of Keynote. It was like the old school PowerPoint kind of slideshow thing. Yeah. But you could draw shapes. So I started doing the stick figure fights there because I could just do a circle and I could do a 4 lines or 5 lines. And right. I could make this thing. And I was like, the way that you'd animate it afterwards, you make this slideshow with 100 frames and then you just go. Tick, 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 tick.
Oh, you just press the button?
Yeah, you had to tap. You couldn't hold it. At least I remember I would be sitting there going like this. Maybe I could hold it and I never figured that out, but I would just be tapping like crazy. But then fortunately within about a month or so of that, one of the teachers saw what I was doing and she's like, hey, we have this software on this other computer. There's a newer computer and it's called Flash MX. And I'm like, oh, tell me about it. And she's like, well, look, you can make, it's like what you're doing, but it's better. And I'm like, oh. And that was really the beginning. I started watching videos on the internet like Homestar Runner and, going to Newgrounds and watching like these super old, there was the E-Bombs World and all that.
E-Bombs World.
There's so many of these different
what a throwback.
Sites.
Yeah.
I think Newgrounds was my favorite along with Homestar because Newgrounds was very much like you could just upload anything. Everything by everyone was the motto or
this
slogan.
Is pre-YouTube.
It was pre-YouTube. Yeah. My first video I uploaded I was probably 13. It got blammed, which means like you upload a video onto Newgrounds and then there's like a review process where you can vote on it. And if you get enough negative votes, it just gets deleted from the site because they had to preserve a level of quality.
Oh, wow.
Because there was a limited amount of storage space back then,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so there was like a review process. So my first video got blamed, but then I started making some things that were a little bit more elaborate and practicing more. And the first video that I actually published, I guess, I was still 13. It was called Devil May Cry Flash Edition. It's still up available. You can watch it on Newgrounds. It's still there. And it was like a parody where I did like 16 different styles, maybe not that many, but a bunch of different styles I was playing with to animate like a parody of the Devil May Cry video game because that was something I was like super into.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then from there, I did a Metal Gear Solid parody and a Kingdom Hearts parody and I just started experimenting. I started writing a story of my own and started animating that. And then from like 14 to 18 or so, I was animating this series called Exile, which is a book that I'm still writing and I want to do a full production feature of it one day. But it's kind of like a cross between if you mixed Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and all of these, epic
So those
stories.
are 3 epic tales of good versus evil.
Well, sort of, but Exile is my own story.
Awesome.
Inspired by all these different anime shows, movies, and things.
Oh,
but
cool,
it was all put together into an original telling of an original story.
Awesome.
That that I animated 4 episodes of, but they were so elaborate, and I decided to make it really hard on myself. Like I could have done the mouth, just 2 frames, just all the lip syncing. It could have been like whenever
just
the characters
up and down.
talk. Instead, I hand drew every mouth individually throughout the entire thing. So and that was just, I know, it was insane. And so every episode took about a year to produce.
Whoa.
And that would be how I would spend my evenings. I would go to school, I'd come home, and like 3 to 5 hours every night, I was just working on these cartoons.
Wow.
And telling these stories. And so I did that from 14 to 18 or 19.
Did you put any of these out at the time? And they're still out, you said?
4 full episodes.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're all up on my YouTube and Newgrounds and stuff.
Cool.
And then from there, it was when I was 19, I had my spiritual awakening. I just finished college, and
finished college at 19 is going to sound crazy to Americans.
Yeah, well, it was 18 and 19.
Okay.
And I was right at the end of being 19. I was almost 20.
Okay.
I was finishing 2 years of college where I did video. I actually took DMT in college.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a joke.
Was that
digital multimedia technology?
Oh, that was a class. Okay, great.
Yeah, and then they changed it to digital media design because I think a few years later they realized
Really?
they probably, well, or maybe design was a more appropriate name, but the course was called DMT. I didn't even know what that meant back then, but I took that 2 years of that, and I learned like After Effects and web design and more graphic design. My art skills improved and all that stuff. In some regards, I ended up teaching the 2D animation class because I was more advanced than my teachers were as far as 2D animation goes.
Really? Yeah. Because you had just been doing it for so long.
That happened in high school as well.
Yeah.
I had a computer graphics class, and they were like, all right, now Jordan's going to teach the class for the next 3 days. We're going to learn Adobe Animate or Adobe Flash. And so that was really fun.
Awesome.
It all came together. I was just at the tail end of college. I had a spiritual awakening, and I was watching, extra credits and these other YouTube content, and Spirit Science just came about as a result of kind of putting all the pieces together. And originally I was only going to make 12. Mm-hmm. That was going to be it. I made the episode about thoughts and chakras, astral projection, meditation, dimensions, and then I was like, the finale is going to be this human history movie. It's going to be like 5 parts because it's so much talk about Atlantis, fall of Atlantis, all this stuff. And then I'm just going to go like this, and I'm going to see what else is out there for me in my life. I'll probably keep doing the spiritual stuff. I'm very, very interested in it, but we'll just see what happens after these 12. And then Spirit Science got so popular so fast. I was inundated with messages. I'd never seen that level of success, and everybody was asking for more. And I felt there was this responsibility to keep going with it and to keep growing it. Yeah. And so I did.
Awesome. Now, did you grow up with spirituality at all? Any semblance of it?
No, actually. Well, my parents took me to church when I was a kid. We would go to Sunday school, it was Sunday school for me, but we would go to Sunday church service, and I always hated it and didn't get it. I always had to wear these like really, suit-like
those
shirts.
Tight, conservative style,
Oh, shudder just thinking.
Yeah.
Not fun times. But we would go into, we'd go to Sunday school, and sometimes we get to watch like VeggieTales and stuff. So that was fun. But I just didn't get it. I didn't have any sort of connection with it. And so when we finally stopped going, I was relieved. And I didn't really think about it. And my family didn't really push any spiritual agenda or anything like that. They're just like, let him figure out whatever he wants to figure out. So I went through a wave where I just didn't think about it. And then I went through a wave of being like a very severe atheist. Being like
severe atheist?
Yeah, I was really like, I think what triggered that was I watched Religulous by Bill Maher.
Oh my God, yeah.
Which was really a very...
Wow, I haven't seen that in so long.
Yeah, it's so funny. And yet at the same time I watch it now and I'm like, actually, this is like really arrogant. I find myself disagreeing with a lot of it because he's asking these pointed questions, not letting the people responding, and then putting in these like kind of like comedic sound effects and stuff to like make fun of them and their answers when... Yeah, it just didn't seem like appropriate now. But back in the day, I saw that and I was like, these people don't know what they're talking about. Bill Maher is a genius, and I was really into him and his work and his show and his stand-up routines. And kind of went through like a wave of atheism until I wasn't. I don't know, something really shifted. Like I think it was. Let me see. I met some people who introduced me to The Secret. You know,
The Secret.
The movie, The
Mm-hmm.
Secret.
Yeah.
And along with that, one of the people introduced me to chakras and Reiki. And I was like, I've never heard of this before, but I'm very curious. It was funny because I was actually invited to this, it's like a gathering of, it was like a meetup, I guess like a business, digital media, graphic meetup event that my school was kind of not facilitating, but some of the people within the school were like facilitating, and other local entrepreneurs and business owners would come, and everyone's just there jerking each other off, giving each other business cards, you know,
right.
And it was
Network City.
It was networking city, and
Yeah.
it was kind of strange. Like I didn't really feel like I fit in there, but there was this one woman who was just kind of sitting by herself, and I was like, let me go say hi because I got no one else to talk to. And she's like, yeah, I'm a Reiki master, and everyone else is like, oh yeah, I'm CEO of this, and I do this design, and I'm an artist, and I'm a video person, I'm a web person. She's like, I'm a Reiki master, and I'm like, I don't know what that is.
You master rakes? You're good at sweeping up leaves?
So she explained it to me, and I was like, I've never heard of your energy. What's energy? You know, I mean, like electric. What are you talking about? And so we talked a lot that night, and she invited me over to her place, and then her friends introduced me to The Secret and some crystals and stuff. And I watched The Secret, and I was just like,
wow.
Because my whole awareness of reality was starting to shift on its head, and I'm like, everyone, if we just be happier, we'll be happier, and life will be better. Come on, like, and everyone around me, my parents especially, were like, oh my God, just shut up. You know, like no, you can't just make yourself be happy and then life is better. That's not how it works. And I was convinced that was how it worked.
Yeah.
And so that just kind of started the process. I started learning a little bit more about all of these subjects, and then my mom actually I'm sitting down reading or something, and she drops The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life on my lap.
Wow.
And turns out she had this kind of a secret stash of spiritual wisdom with her for a very long time. And she told me that she had essentially grown up having a lot of mystical experiences, you know, and even in her she grew up in Nova Scotia, and on their farm there was a lot of ghost activity and like strange paranormal things that would happen. And so she understood this mystical spiritual stuff, and she had read some books and had some crystals, and, you know, she was kind of into it all. But she kept it very much on the down low, because back in the day, if you talked about that amongst the people, anyone, for the most part, there was just going to be ridicule and scorn.
There was a stigma.
There's a stigma, and she didn't want to expose me to that, because then if I was into it, then I went to school and I would be like, hey, so crystals and energy, people would be like, oh my God.
Right.
He's already the laughingstock, because he spends
He's already
his time
drawing on dictionaries.
He does. He doesn't play sports. He makes cartoons. No one else does that.
Right.
He already gets some kind of, you know, let's just let him be. And I was mad at her for a while, because I was like, how did you have all of this awareness and didn't tell me? She's like, well, you needed to find it out on your own. I'm like, no, I didn't. I could have been meditating since I was 12. So, but bless her heart, she was, you know, doing her best to protect me.
Of course, yeah.
So she drops this book, and I open it up. The first thing I'm reading is like, there's a sphere under the Sphinx that holds the records of ancient Atlantis, and da-da-da. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And I just poured through the book. And I basically spent the next like 3 months just studying those texts and some other things other books that I had at the time. But those ones were by far the most impactful to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I mean, that was the beginning of spirit science. And even the name spirit science, I remember I think I was meditating one evening, and then I got up and I was like cleaning my bookshelf in my bedroom. And then suddenly I just like, it was like a flash of light in my mind. Spirit science, that's the name. Because I was like, I want to make a video about this, and it was like, ooh, make this series, call it Spirit Science. I was like, yes, of course.
That's it. That's a download, dude.
Yeah,
that's what you got. That's
I got
awesome.
the download, and then I installed it, and I uploaded it.
Yeah, and then you taught the class about it.
Yep.
That's great. Did psychedelics play a role within that awakening period as well? And even prior to that, you know, it sounds like maybe your upbringing in a religious adjacent family I would assume would be a bit conservative toward things like drugs and psychedelics.
Absolutely. Well, I had never even heard of psychedelics, right? I took DMT in college, but I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah, hilarious.
As the class. But I was introduced to cannabis right around the age of 18. And that was before any spiritual, like I wasn't even thinking about spiritual stuff. That was pre-atheism even.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to a house party with some friends and they were smoking weed, and I was like, I've never heard of this. What is this green thing that you are putting in your, in your lungs? And so I had it, and instead of just having it and then like chilling with everyone, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm going to go lay down. And I went and laid down, and I was like, I was like seeing stars and like feeling like my whole body was made of stars and light, and almost as if all of the cells were particles that were shimmering. And I was like, this is amazing. I have to get some of this for myself. And I quickly learned that my parents did not approve.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
That's a fast lesson to learn.
I had it thrown out or flushed down the toilet.
Really? No way.
Yeah.
Man.
My mom caught me and my brother.
What a funny way to get rid of weed. I mean,
well, because if it's in the garbage, you can always go back and get it.
Yeah, I guess you can go back and get it. But just like if it clogs the pipes and you bring somebody over, they're going to be like, hey, you, just call me before you flush it down, and I'll take care of it for you. You know, But keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. But it became this like remedy for me, because I realized through it just how much stress I actually had. I would use it to calm down and to relax when, after going through junior high and high school, where I faced a lot of, especially junior high, there was so much bullying and so much stigma and so much stress from, I just didn't know how to relate with the world, and I struggled with, just a lot of different things, a lot of personal human stuff that I think everyone probably grows up with. Smoking cannabis was just like this ultimate, like, here, this will help you solve everything. And I was like, yeah, it will. And I became also very pro, like, I started to look at the world in a different way. Like, growing up, I felt like I was a blank slate. My parents led me to believe, by their lack of instruction, that the world was just perfect. There was no problems with, maybe there's some issues in society and a little bit, but for the most part, society runs like an organized system. Everyone kind of has their place in life. Everything works. Society has its gears, and everything's moving along, and there's nothing to worry about. And when I started smoking weed, I was like, wait, no, like, things aren't right, because this should be legal. And the fact that I'm getting so much trouble for smoking weed, something is seriously wrong here. And I started becoming kind of like very pro legalization and talking about it, and that created more friction with my parents, because they were like, if you have it, if you're caught, like, that'll be the end of our career. There was a fear from them, because they're working professionals. They're very wonderful people in the world, and they don't want their children to put them in jeopardy. And so I had to be very careful with it, but I started creating some conflict in the family, because I was like, this is retarded. Like, the way that we're treating this stuff this is insane. Yeah. And this needs to be rectified. So I think the cannabis played a big part of me starting to look at the world as less than the ideal situation that it was. And it also opened up the door into politics alongside Bill Maher. I think that's actually what led me to him and his material a little bit, because he would talk about and make jokes about cannabis being illegal, and he was following the legalization in California movement. And I was like, yeah, I hope if California legalizes, they'll be the first, and then everyone's going to follow. It'll be great. People shouldn't be going to jail for 20 years for having a bag of weed. Yeah. And so I started learning about politics, learning about, and that opened the door to the religion and stuff. But then cannabis was also like the turning point, I think, that like definitively set my heart and my mind in a sort of unity as far as my spiritual awakening goes. Because, I met these people, and they introduced me to the subjects, and I was learning about it, but somewhere in there, and I actually kind of I don't really know the order of when and how this happened, but at one point I was smoking weed after college with my friends in their car, and I had what can only be described as like a transcendent mystical experience, where I remembered smoking it, and I was looking at the bowl as I was smoking it, and it just looked different, almost as if like my awareness itself did a 90-degree turn, like something changed, and I couldn't explain it. And I was like, what? And I was, okay, I passed it around, and I'm like, all right, but it's in me. And then we drove around for another minute and parked, and then all of a sudden, we were just chatting. All of a sudden, I kind of have this experience as though I'm being taken to another dimension. Like I just gonna go, and suddenly like everything's black, and then there's this singular point of light right here, and then all like coming down from it is like a web of information and energy. Kind of looks like like a neural net.
Sure.
That's coming from this singular point. But the experience of it was not separate from me. Although I was looking at it, I also understood that what I was seeing and experiencing was the complete unity of all things with all things. It was like, here's all creation. Very simplified, right? Because the universe is very big.
Yeah.
But here's all creation, and that all thoughts, all actions, all planets, all stars, all animals, all life, all rocks, all everything is all intricately connected to this one thing, and that there is no separation, period, in anything. And the experience seemed to last both a lifetime, and then it was over in a flash. Like it was like I was there and I was suddenly back.
In the car with your friends.
In my car with my...
Which is a wild place to have that type of experience. I mean, even if you were just zoning out for a couple seconds, having this experience, they must have looked at you like, hey, bro, you good?
No, I freaked out. Well, two of my friends had left right before, like they left, we drove around, parked, and then so it was me and the driver. Fortunately, I was not in the driver's seat, and I was about to get out too. But I suddenly was just like, oh my God, I understand everything. Like I kind of freaked out, like very excitedly, not in a scary way, but I was so excited. And I didn't know how to explain it. And she was like, oh, you inhaled for the first time, huh?
Hilarious. That's so funny, dude.
And I'm like, no, I've inhaled before. I promise you. This was different. Maybe it was just really good weed.
It was really good weed.
Really
but
good
it
weed.
Also is, in my experience at least, rare to have that type of experience on something like cannabis as opposed to LSD, mushrooms, something deeper, ibogaine, something else, iboga,
Yeah.
So like, have you had that deep of an experience with weed since? Do you think that's like your personal interaction with the substance?
It's interesting. I think that to some degree, spirit used the weed as a mechanism, a vehicle to come to draw me a little bit closer to it or him or her, right? And that was the best mechanism that was available at the time, because I'd never even heard of psychedelics or anything of this.
Still up to that point, you weren't.
No, actually, that's true. I don't think that at that point I'd even read. I hadn't read The Flower of Life yet. That was before I read that book, and that was the one that he mentions LSD and society and stuff like that. I might have heard of like hippies and
something
drugs,
about mushrooms randomly, but it
never would have even cognitively registered in my mind as to what that meant or what it was.
Yeah,
and so moving from that point. That was a kind of a trigger point for me. And then I still would smoke weed. I wasn't fully meditating back then. But since then, just to answer your question, I would say I have and have not had that kind of experience with weed since. Because, I can use it and often do. If I do use it, it'll be very consciously in the sense of like, all right, I'm going to smoke some weed and I'm going to go and meditate, or I'm going to use it for a specific purpose. I don't really use it much lately for anything outside of that. And lately, even the last few months, I've barely been called to it at all. Like, I don't really see it as very necessary. Maybe a little bit here and there. But in the past, in the last 11, 12 years, mostly if I had it, I would sit down and then I would meditate, and just kind of use it to go within. And from that perspective, I would have a lot of these really mystical experiences and kind of bring my body of consciousness into resonance and harmony with itself. And that would be a really valuable reason to use it for the most part. At the same time, and then, there's always times where you use it recreationally just for fun and stuff like that.
Because it makes a movie cool.
Yeah. But I've never since then had the experience with weed where I'm like just spontaneously in another dimension and being shown something. So nothing that stands out to me anyways. Usually it's like, okay, I'm gonna use it to draw myself closer to spirit rather than spirit being like, he needs to know this. Bring him here. That's
so and this experience that you had in the car was still pre-spirit science, right?
Yeah.
So what? And in between this experience and getting into spirit science, did this experience encourage you to start learning about other medicines and other substances?
That's what. Yeah. Well, it definitely started kind of everything. It wasn't like now I need to know what LSD is.
Yeah.
But it was like now I need to go full bore into this journey, and my life was never going to be the same again.
Yeah.
You know, my mom thought that I was going to get a job at Disney making cartoons. Mm-hmm. Or animations, you know, working on their, you know, working on the next Aladdin remake. I don't know, whatever, you know, some 2D thing, but no, like from that moment especially, it was like I am 100% committed to whatever this path is. That is a complete mystery to me, but it's clearly the answer to the big question mark, you know, and that answer being the mystery of spirituality, the mystery of what is a human, and what does it mean to go within, and what do we find when we go within, and why is it that the more that we do that, the more lightness, the more joy, the more happiness, the more peace, you know, that we find when we start reconciling the different paradoxes that are within us and out in our lives, and what good can be done when we live from that place, because it seems as though the world is not as harmonious as I once thought it to be. And could it be that this inward path is the answer to the outward disharmony that we struggle with societally, collectively, right? Because there's wisdom teachings and wisdom traditions in every culture, right? There's so many different paths that we can take. And my dear friend Master Elijah shared with me just recently, he's like, there's good people in every tradition, but most traditions, or within most cultures, there's still a lot of people, they might outwardly say that they practice this spiritual path, but they still are not doing good, genuine good in their lives or in the world. So how is it that, you know, we've got all these different religions with all these different teachings? Is it that the teachings are wrong, or is it that the people are just, they've kind of lost their way a little bit? And so, you know, for me, the answer was, well, if I can go within and kind of reconcile these paradoxes and come to know myself better, as the ancient Greeks and so many different people have said, know thyself, right? If I can know myself, if I can grow as a person, maybe I can also help point others towards themselves, so that all of us can find a little bit more peace and make the world a better place.
It's beautiful. Yeah, that's really cool. And on this journey of self-discovery and self-understanding, I'm starting to see little tree branches on coming out of that journey, like medicines, you know, helping you do this.
Yep.
Encouragement from friends and family. But then there also seems to be like a deeply rooted interest in history for you. Did you always have that? Because I've watched a lot of the videos that you've done, and there's such a deep teaching of like histories, like amazing, incredible histories of people and groups of people that I've never heard of before, or like ways of thought and schools of thought that I never thought existed, and ways of looking at things as taught by this person and his the person that he apprenticed under. So did your footsteps into working with medicines more and more also intertwine with a growing interest in history? Like, how did those two things start to come together?
You know, I think that the way that they kind of fit together, it really was put together so well in The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, which contained everything. Because I read the history story of Atlantis in there, and I wanted to animate it. I also learned about how it fits into the bigger picture, and the awakening that we're going through today with, with the psychedelics and the hippie LSD 60s, and everything that happened then. Like it was all put together in a complete picture. So I kind of got the picture first, and that deepened my understanding, and then also compelled me to want to be a part of it, I guess, like learn more about the history, read more of the ancient stuff, because I was raised in the world where, I got the traditional Western understanding of history, and I slept through a lot of my history class, honestly. Like it was always the earliest class in the morning, and like my teacher, bless his heart, he let me sleep. So the first half of the class, I had
right,
face down in my desk, and they were just like, yeah, just let them do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's all good. And so, you know, I wasn't really, I didn't really care so much about the historical stuff until all of the spiritual awakening, and then I was suddenly interested in everything,
Right.
and I wanted to know the actual truth. So I would learn history from the perspective of, say, the Chinese or the Japanese or the Muslims, and then the Christians and the Orthodoxy, and then the Catholic, kind of how they fit together, and then the Greek, and then all of these different pictures, and trying to understand how they fit together, even, going back older than that, the Sumerians and the Egyptians, and looking at the, like Göbekli Tepe and these ancient sites, and the ruins in Africa that show that humans were doing stuff over there, maybe they're gold mines from 250,000 years ago. There's like a lot of strange anomalies in our history that don't really seem to fit in the picture of the puzzle. And that was where I wanted to, I just put my focus of study. And that's kind of where the Sumerian epic came from. That was one of my biggest projects. It's still kind of ongoing. But we had the story of this, like the Anunnaki and Nibiru and all of these things. And I wanted to go and read the actual Enuma Elish, the actual translations of the cuneiform Sumerian tablets, and then animate it and tell that story and see, is there validity to the story of Nibiru and the story of the Anunnaki and this and that? Like, let's find out. I'm not claiming it is, because with the Human History movie originally, it was like, this is the way that it is, because I was just essentially animating it from the text, not necessarily, I wasn't approaching it with that, like, it's very analytical, even doubtful, like a
you were kind of taking in information and kind of regurgitating it out for an audience using your own voice.
Correct.
But you hadn't fully immersed yourself in order to create a perspective that maybe sidesteps all of the things you were learning, right? And adds to it.
I've received a lot of criticism from the spirit science audience from that in the very beginning, because I wasn't asking as many detailed questions as I might have needed to in order to get the best perspective. Yeah. And so the Sumerian epic was essentially a way for me to put a better foot forward as far as the history goes, and say, look, I don't know. I'm not claiming to have all the answers that the Anunnaki are real or what their role was, if they are real in our history. But here's what the texts say, and here's the evidence, and decide for yourself. Here's ways that the story fits. Here's ways that maybe it doesn't so much. A lot of the ideas came from Zecharia Sitchin about Nibiru and the Anunnaki, and maybe some of it's true, but maybe some of it's a little bit off base. And but people still may believe in it or not otherwise. And I wanted to make a series or create some content that could provide clarity to the truth of the whole of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome, because that didn't exist before you did it.
It didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't. And I went, before spirit science existed, I went out onto the internet and I tried to find people talking about this kind of stuff, and I barely found anything. And so even in the very first episode of Spirit Science, I was like, I want more people to talk about it with. Yeah. And probably with that voice too. I'm like, hey everybody, I don't know what is going on, but I want more people to talk about spirituality with. So here we go. And from that point, I mean, it grew up so fast, and then now it's everywhere. Yeah. Now there's no shortage of the spiritual stuff. Everyone's talking about it.
Yeah. No, it was a pioneering series for sure. I listened to a couple different podcasts. Aubrey Marcus talks about things within that realm all the time, and a few others. Graham Hancock, and amazing, oh God, I can't believe I'm forgetting the other guy's name. I love him so much. Oh no, he's a professor. Rogue scholar is how he describes himself. Bigger guy, beard, mustache, professor of geology and history things.
He was on a podcast.
Oh my God, why can't I think of his name?
Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock.
Yeah. Oh. He's the fucking man. I love him so much. We can't go on until we find this man's name.
I
wish I had an assistant here.
I watched that podcast when we did the Sumerian epic originally, and that was the last time I really got
Randall Carlson.
That's his name.
Randall Carlson. Sorry to explode.
Beautiful soul.
Yeah, I love amazing. Both of them are great. I love Randall to death. Yeah. Have you seen Ancient Apocalypse on Netflix yet?
I have not yet seen it.
Great. You know what it is?
I just became aware of it the other day.
Cool. Yeah. So Graham Hancock made a show about everything that he's been studying for years. It's really good. It's funny that, because the topic is like, I don't think it's a dry topic. I think it's very exciting and like fun to learn. Like I really truthfully enjoy learning about things of this nature and history and things like that. But I think a lot of the public would read what the show is about and just be like, oh God, I don't want to learn history again, you know? Because it's like he's going to go to ancient sites and try to prove a hypothesis by looking at the weather patterns and the rocks and these things. But the way that they shot and edited it, you feel like you're watching like Jersey Shore mixed with like some other reality show mixed with like an action movie. It's crazy entertaining. It's like really, really cool.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So I was excited to see that because hopefully just like your content is so digestible. It's very approachable. You know, it's very digestible for a quote mainstream audience. That's a huge key, I think, in getting knowledge across, you know? Was that, what was the inspiration behind Patchman? Was that part of it? Trying to figure out like a fun character to communicate?
Nope, I didn't invent Patchman.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Do you mind if I ask where Patchman came from?
Absolutely. It's funny because I get like, there's people on the internet, you know, maybe we call them trolls, but there's people who will go on and be like, he didn't even invent Patchman. He bought it for $20. And I'm like, actually, it was $100. But there's a story there, and it's a beautiful story, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with it.
No way.
You know,
First off, that was hilarious.
Yeah.
But
No,
I want to hear the story.
Again, God gave me everything I needed so that it would be very easy for me to do what I was going to do. Because if I didn't have Patchman in my arsenal, I probably wouldn't have. It probably would have been an animated Jordan, you know, just like extra credits. And then today we wouldn't have Patchman.
Right.
And so I'm very grateful for the whole story. But no, I received Patchman like a year prior, or I bought him a year prior before Spirit Science, and I had been working with him for like 3 years or 2 years before that. And so Patchman was first invented by a friend of mine who went by the username Applejuice online. He first contacted me because he had been watching my videos when I was 14. He actually lived in BC when I was in Winnipeg, and now I live in BC, so maybe I should reach out to him. But he was inspired by the cartoons and the content that I was making, and he's a year younger than me. So here's this 14-year-old and a 13-year-old, and he's like, "Hey, I really like your videos," and I'd be like, "Yeah, how do you do it?" "Oh, I Adobe Flash," and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna go pirate it too." I'm like, "Yeah, me too. I did that. Everyone does. Nobody can afford it, you know, because it was like $3,000, and all the kids are using it." Right. Adobe got smart with their subscription model.
Yeah, this is back when you could pirate things. Yeah, I was pirating movies, everything.
Yeah,
totally.
That was the way.
Kazaa, Shazam, all that stuff. Yeah.
So what happened was he created a bunch of characters, you know, and he was like, I'm going to make cartoons with all of these guys. And he's got a little guy with the like 3D glasses, and another guy who's Patchman, another guy who's like a little ball creature or whatever. And he was really excited about it, but his interests, you know, just fizzled out, or changed rather, you know, for him in his life. Like he was really inspired and excited, but then he never did anything with the character. And maybe 2 or 3 years went by, and here I am kind of just at the beginning of college or just at the end of high school. And I had been making Exile, that story I mentioned, for 3 years now. And I'm like, it takes me a year to make an episode. This is absurd. I want to do something short. I want to do something where I can make a video in like 2 weeks and publish it. Just for the, you know, because there's a payoff that comes with when you finally finish a thing and then you share it and then you see how many likes that it has and people's comments, and that really enriches the experience, because you're not making the video just for yourself.
Right.
You know, people make content because they want to share it and they want to inspire others or get a laugh or whatever. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to get people laughing, or to have, you know, just have a short-term turnaround time between starting a project and publishing it. And so I started thinking of these shorts, you know, like a short comedy skit that I could make that would take, you know, a week or two to make, and I could publish it. And I had this idea for this character, and I started thinking of Patchman. Like Patchman just came to my mind. I was like imagining him playing this, you know, this particular song, and he's sprinkling salt on his morning toast for some reason. Just like this, it was like slapstick nonsense.
Yeah.
Sprinkling salt on his toast, and then he, you know, it's not coming out, so he tries to open it, and it gets in his eyes. And then there's like it's just like a minute-long animation of him running around the house trying to get it out of his eyes, but he keeps hurting himself more and more.
Oh my God.
He goes to get like cotton swabs, and there's a little note that's like, "Oh, I've replaced I've replaced the eye drops with hot sauce, and I've put toothpicks in the so he puts hot sauce in his eyes, and then he tries to flush it down the toilet, and he stabs himself in the eye with a toothpick, and he's like, ah!
Oh my God.
And then it freezes, and it goes, there's a Visine for that.
Dude, that reminds me of, did you ever watch the cartoon Rejected?
That sounds very familiar.
Oh man, I gotta look this up too. I won't play it now because of the YouTube stuff, but I'll send it to you after. Rejected by Dan.
Sounds very familiar.
Or Don Hertzfeldt. It was this style of drawing.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever see that? And there was
so.
one where like the guy started bleeding out of his ass.
Yeah.
And it was. I know that
sounds
sounds terrible, but
no. I have seen that.
It reminds me of this because it's like absurd and it's silly and it's crazy.
You don't know what to make of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that. And so I had the whole idea, and I reached out to my friend, my Apple Juician friend, and I said, hey, can I make this thing with Patchman? I just have this funny idea.
Do you mind if I got to interrupt? Had you met him prior to this yet? Or was it still friends online?
You're just online.
Okay, cool.
I've never met him in person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wild. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I reached out to him and I asked if I could use Patchman, and he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And I made the video in a week and a half or so and published it, and it was great. It felt really good to make a video that didn't take a year to make. And I went, I want to do this again. And so then I got another idea. That was a parody of The Dark Knight, but with Patchman kind of being Batman, and he was like hurting people in the street and like ripping their legs off. It was really violent. And then all of a sudden, right when he's like eating this woman's head, suddenly he like slowly turns to look at the camera, and it like zooms out, and he's in his sister's bedroom, and he's like eating her dolls, and it's just like it's all within his imagination. And then his sister's like, oh mom, Patchman's in my room again, and he like jumps out of the window and runs away into the night. And so once again I reached out to my friend. I was like, can I use Patchman and for this? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So I made that one, and then it happened again and again. And after I think the third video, he was like, listen, clearly, like, I'm never going to use this character again. I'm not an animator anymore.
Yeah.
You're having so much fun with him. Why don't you just send me $100 and we'll call it an even sale, and he's yours, and you do whatever you want for him. You never have to ask me again for permission. He's just your character.
Right.
I was like, yeah, that sounds like a no brainer, right? I was 18 at the time, so I PayPal $100, and Patchman and I've never been closer since.
Amazing, dude.
Yeah.
Has he watched the growth of Patchman over the years? Have you guys stayed in touch?
I think the last time we talked was I was starting to make Spirit Science. I was probably like 5 or 6 episodes in, and I think I sent him one of them. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And I think that he was like, I really disagree with what you're sharing. I don't think I see any validity to this, and I don't really like the trajectory, but I wish you well. I'm happy that you're doing what your heart is calling you to do. I wish you well. Have a great life. And I was like, cool.
That's a solid thing to say. That's a very solid thing to say. I think that, right? You might have been, what was your response to that?
I think I just said thank you, and
there
wasn't like a lot of conversation after that.
Yeah.
But I had that conversation a few times with a few friends when I made Spirit Science. Like I think I come to understand a little bit more of what Jesus meant when he said that. He's like, when I come not to bring peace but a sword. Because the sword is the thing that cuts between, with different beliefs, different perspectives, cuts because the sword is the idea of, especially like the clear mind, the sword of truth, if you will. And I'm not claiming that I'm always in the right here, that all Spirit Science is the truth, but
sure.
that there was a very clear division that was created from me taking this path. And a lot of people who I grew up with, who were my friends up until high school and college, when I shared this with them, a lot of people went, okay, I'm not sure that I'm on the same wavelength here. Have a nice life. And there was a lot of separation. So I'm really not very close with most of the people who I grew up with anymore.
Interesting.
From high school and college. Like, there are a few friends who I still have from childhood that I really cherish those connections. But a lot of other people, we just kind of went our own way, because I took this, especially back then. I think today there's so much... the awareness of the spiritual subjects is a lot more tolerated, I guess, but it was so out there. Like, you didn't have this choice of new age spirituality, or in the mainstream, there wasn't knowledge or an awareness about it. Now, today, like Pixar is making movies about the 4 elements, Avatar, Airbender is out there. They even in that movie Soul that Pixar did, the guy's like, open up your crown chakra and we're gonna go to the astral dimension, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
There's it's just everywhere now.
Doctor Strange and the multiverse did a lot of stuff. Yeah.
But back then that was not an available way of thinking. It was like you were atheist or you were Christian, and generally you just didn't talk about it. So the fact that I wasn't just wanting to talk about it but making cartoons about it, I think a lot of people went like, ooh, and they backed off.
Yeah, they sought distance between you guys. Wow, interesting. That's very interesting. I've experienced something similar on a smaller scale, and I think it's the similarity between our experiences is choosing to root yourself in what you feel is most authentic to put out into the world, right? And as opposed, we were talking about this the other night when in the car, when I was saying, I want to do and create things that have my perspective as unfiltered and raw as it can be, because I hold on to the faith that will attract people to me, rather than trying to make things that I know will work or that I know will lean one way or the other about whatever topic, just for likes and views and for a career, right? For me, it was like political videos. And any videos about trending culture and working with certain people and topical stuff and news stuff and finding an angle that I thought was hilarious. And then, I got messages from friends that were like, dude, are you serious? Like, you really think this? What's going on? And I was like, yeah, I'm like, for a simple example is I was anti-mandate. I didn't agree with the mandates of any type. And I had friends that would message me and say like, bro, are you kidding? What are you doing right now? You're actively killing people. You realize that, right? And then like there would be, a year or two where I just didn't hear from that friend. And then the next time I saw them, it would be weird. And I think that in my own journey has led me to believe that is a sacrifice in a way. That's part of the process of stepping into your own true authentic creativity, sacrificing a relationship or being okay with a relationship either faltering or ending or not developing, friendship, love, whatever it is, because you choose to stay so rooted in what you believe is important to talk about. Yeah. So that's really cool. And at what point now do psychedelics start to trickle in? Because now at this point in your journey, as I can tell, we've gotten Patchman on board. We're a couple episodes in, and I'm curious about like your first kind of wading into the waters of the medicine realm.
So really how it all happened was, from learning so much all at once, there's like a singularity in my life. I hit a point of no going back, and I'm interested in everything, and I'm starting to learn about everything. I'm starting to learn that there's something called LSD and there's something called DMT or ayahuasca. And I set out on the road. I was like, I want to see the world now. After making the first 12 episodes of Spirit Science, there were a lot of people who were like, hey, do you want to, if you're ever in the area, I'd love to host you. I'd love to have you, and I was like, that's amazing. And I loved to travel, always have since I was a kid. And so I set out to basically stay with various people across the country and across the world, to just like learn their perspectives and connect with them and see kind of what was going on, what other things I could learn from the people around me. I didn't want to just learn from books. I wanted to meet people.
You wanted to engage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I started to travel, and then at one point I met a friend who was like, hey, I just got some DMT. And that was actually the first psychedelic that I ever tried.
You stepped in with DMT.
Yeah, but it was like a really light dose.
It was like a handshake with God.
Because we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, that's how my buddy describes it. When I first tried DMT, he was like, all right, day 1, we're just going to get you acquainted. Yeah. You're going to have a handshake with God. Day 2, you're going to lay down and take a nap with him. I was like, okay, cool.
So, I mean, I would say that from that experience, because it was so light, like the first night that I tried it, I just didn't really feel much. I think I felt really heavy. So I just kind of became heavy and curled up in a ball for a while. And I was like, that was weird. Meanwhile, my friend, him and his partner especially, she was like, you guys were like light particles, geometry and shapes and everything was, And so that was pretty cool. I'm glad she had a good experience. And then the next day I tried it again. I had a little bit more and I kept my eyes open and I was like, everything is just liquid. Like the ceiling is liquid. The floor is liquid. Everything is just moving like this. This is cool. And then it faded down and then we ran out because he only had a little bit. So I didn't really have that breakthrough. Everyone's saying like, you're going to go to other dimensions and meet other beings and da-da-da. And I didn't really have that. I just, I mostly stayed here, but started to be like, okay, maybe reality is maybe not so solid, or maybe the DMT just makes things look liquid. I don't know, And a couple months went by and then I had acid for the first time. And that was an experience of, I don't know how I would describe it. Like I was at this like very small gathering festival kind of thing. Like there was 100 people, big campfire. There's some EDM music. There was some nice hiking trails, right? It was very in nature. You could sleep in a tent or
beautiful
a small room. Yeah, it was a very nice, comfortable size. And I remember just experiencing myself as kind of like a comet. Like there'd be like this fire pit over here and this fireplace over here, and then all these other different dimensions. And I would run between them, and I would be like this comet going in and out of different solar systems. Where every different solar system was and I was just experiencing life in a new way, and it felt very liberating. It felt very freeing, and I'll never forget it. And that was on 11/11 of 2011.
Wow. Whoa.
So it was a good day.
That's very sacred.
Yeah. It was a good day to get started with that. And, I was just kind of open, like, if these find me, I'm not really in the position to go hunting for it. But if they find me, I'm going to continue to explore with them. And, the next one was, I think, around New Year's in Australia. I was with some people who are watching this might remember the Atlantis King. There's this guy from Australia who I met. His name is Tyler. He's a wonderful soul, and he was making some content similar to mine. And so he and I hit it off, and we connected, and he invited me to come out. So I flew to Australia.
Wow, cool.
And had this wonderful experience with him. And on New Year's into 2012, we had some more acid, and I had kind of a very strange experience where I think some like dark energy or limiting thinking or belief systems or something came out of my head. Like this was weird, but like I remember waking up in the morning and my head was covered in like in little dots everywhere. This like white goo coming out of the top of my head. I had very short hair at the time. And I remember washing it, and then like some more would kind of come out.
Whoa.
But that was post-seeded by, or it came after the wait a second. No, I said that wrong. It was preceded by the experience that I'm describing of I laid down on this mat and I was looking up at the star Sirius in the sky, and coming out of the star was this like dancing angel, and I was just like watching the star becoming this angel of light, and she was like dancing. It was so beautiful, and it just felt like this sort of cosmic blessing that I didn't understand. And then we had a great night, and then in the morning this kind of stuff happened, and I was like, okay, this is very strange, but I feel lighter. I feel changed. I couldn't describe how. But since then, I think I've experienced a very wide gamut of psychedelics, like, especially those original experiences. I think Spirit was really taking care of me. At the same time, I've learned that I have to learn to also take care of myself and regulate how I use them, because dark energies and bad experiences can come in just as much as really good ones, depending on the circumstances. So in my curiosity to be a sort of a pioneer for myself of the psychedelics, I've had both just the most transcendent and amazing experiences, and also some incredibly dark, twisted, scary ones. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that. Like, it sounds like so far from what I've described, someone listening might be like, wow, I got to get me some acid or whatever, right? And I actually want to encourage people to like really take the time to learn about it first, because I've put myself through many years of suffering and just hard or difficult times and challenging circumstances and relationships, because I was maybe a little bit too flippant or a little didn't take the psychedelics or the substances as seriously because I was like, oh no, it's always great.
Yeah, you were a bit more casual in your approach.
A bit more casual. I didn't really know about the need for what you could call psychic protection, or, just setting the space, the proper space and setting and substance, or making sure that everything is really sacred. Because when you don't treat it that way, I mean, I kind of see it like a portal into I might say other dimensions, but more so that it makes your awareness more fully aware of yourself and everything around you in all of the dimensions, right?
Yeah, it expands your consciousness.
Yeah, you're already existing multidimensionally. The psychedelics just open yourself up to what's around you. But if you're in a really grungy environment, or you're around people who are really, in a darker place themselves, or they themselves are cursed, or have some dark entities around them, you might end up opening up yourself to receive those spirits, and then it might take you 10, 20 years to exorcise them from your body, because you don't even know that you've been infected. It works that way with food. If we eat some bad food and you don't realize, and then it kind of, that can affect you for a long period of time, just like long belief systems. You grow up with a belief that you're a worthless piece of shit. You go through your whole life thinking so low of yourself, that belief system is going to continually affect you until you rewrite the pattern. So it's the same way with psychedelics, right? It's brought so much clarity, healing, love when it's been used properly, and also has brought me to these places of, like, I've realized some very serious mistakes that I've made in my life by being too flippant or too casual, as you said.
And psychedelics helped you come to that understanding by allowing your awareness to expand.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's like, by using the psychedelics, I can make a big mess, and then I can use more psychedelics to solve them.
Right, to clean it up a little bit.
To make the mess worse.
Or to even see the mess in the first place. Exactly. A mess that might have been invisible to you, or buried so deep in your subconscious that it takes an experience like this to open the hatch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I used to think that the psychedelics were going to be the answer to solve a lot of problems. But I'm realizing now they're just another vehicle, just as food is, just as meditation is, right? For spirit to play a part in one's life. So if we use them with the intention of growing closer to God, or closer to spirit, then in doing so, may we reach our arms up to spirit, and then spirit reaches his arms back and pulls us up, right? And we kind of come closer together. But if we're just like, yeah, no, I can use the psychedelics and I can heal my diseases and heal my whatever, then we're making the substance itself into the deity. Whereas, no, God made the substance. God made the planet. God made right? God did it all. And that's what is meant by the biblical commandment, thou shalt not have any gods before me. And I'm not saying this as like a Christian or trying to preach, go everyone join Catholicism.
Sure, that's what they meant.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like all of the churches, all of the religion. The Tao says that, right? Like, you can find it in every tradition, right? Krishna says that. Like, and all of them are essentially trying to point to, there is a supreme power. You can call it whatever you want to. There is some kind of divine intelligence that is beyond and working its way through everything. It is the way through everything. It is the structure and the spirit and the essence by which all of reality comes into being. And we're essentially like living out and playing this holographic reality experience within that field. And we are the awareness of that greater thing experiencing itself. But we're experiencing ourselves often as this disconnected, separate thing, right? Within that matrix. And we don't perceive that we're all intimately connected. But if we can acknowledge that and humble ourselves and say, oh my God, I don't know. But if there is this divine intelligence that kind of has a greater picture of what's going on, then if I can just surrender or submit myself to the higher power, and say, Lord, do with me what you will, whatever that might be, however we might want to, communicate with that. Because everyone's got a different language. Some people might prefer to say spirit or divine intelligence or supreme oneness or whatever, God. But it's just in that submission, in the allowing yourself to humble yourself before the divine intelligence, then, those who humble themselves will be exalted. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. So let that power play a part in your life, and then it will lead you to the psychedelic if that's right for you, and to have a better experience with it. But if you're like, now I know what I'm doing and I'm going to go and take care of, kind of arrogantly go off and try and write your own story without acknowledgement or awareness of a greater story that's being written, usually we end up kind of going in the wrong way because we're kind of going against the grain. We're not paying attention to where the current of life is actually trying to take us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we can spend, by doing so, we can circumambulate the center that we're supposed to be getting to. We can spend years going in the wrong way or kind of just going around, when if we just went to the center, which means going to our center, going to the pineal, right? And then the center of the heart. By going to the center, we can learn what the story is for us, and then we can walk in that path. And then it's like you and God and all of reality are kind of working together, as opposed to the ego thinking it's going to write its own story, and the spirit kind of going like, all right, but I'm trying to get you over here. You'll like this better, but you're not paying attention and you're going after this.
I got a question for you, because I really want to know, that was such a beautiful description of how psychedelics should be viewed as and approached as separate from a deity and the deity that made them, or however one wants to look at that hierarchical system. And I'm curious what you saw in your own approach to your own content and to the Spirit Science Project. How did you see your approach begin to change as you kept working with psychedelics, like over the past, what has it been, 10 years, a little bit more?
You saying my approach to
your approach, of the work, or to your approach to what you wanted to put out and how you wanted to put it out? You wanted to start with 12 episodes, and now it's grown beyond anything that back then you could have comprehended, probably, right? And I'm curious if at any point the integration of your psychedelic experiences allowed you to form a new approach toward creating content, or even like new pathways toward interests in even deeper subject matter that you may not have had without some of these psychedelic experiences.
Right. Master Elijah described this to me really well the other day. He's like, look, when you started this, you kind of were like a guy with your own little boat, with a light on the boat, and you were setting off into the unknown. You didn't know where you were going, but you were like, I'm just going to go and find out. Whatever the truth is, I wanted to know it, and I set off on my own. I had a light on that boat, and a lot of lost souls. The light was like the videos that I was making, and a lot of these lost souls are people who were also seeking some other truth other than what the traditional mainstream world was telling them. They saw that light, and they were like, that looks like what I want, So a lot of people came on board, and suddenly I'm the captain of a ship with millions of people, but I didn't really have a destination in mind at first. I was just seeking. And in seeking, a lot of people came to me and started seeking with me and following my videos. But then I think there was a challenge that happened where a lot of people started looking up to me as though I had all the answers. And in doing so, they put me on a pedestal. And then when so many people put me on millions of people are messaging me and talking to me about how wonderful and life-changing my videos have been and the content has been, it was a lot to deal with, and I went through my own ego trip for a while, being like, yeah,
I am the shit.
I am the shit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm, and it's only from having gone through this journey of 11 years and trying to make, like I just described with the story of the ego, like my ego being like, well, if I'm, I can't make mistakes, so I'm gonna do this and do that, work with this person, that person, and I created some things that were maybe not the best for me or for even for the audience, because I wasn't thinking that I have this responsibility of the spiritual path of all these people. I was just an explorer myself.
Right.
So people are coming on board, trusting me to be the captain of the ship, but I don't know where I'm going. And then some people jump ship, and now that's technically on me, even though I didn't really know that I set out to
guide them in the first place.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Sure.
So there's been this rapid development in the last few years of like this maturity of how much responsibility I didn't even know that I had to be the best captain that I could be. And in doing so, I'm like, okay, well, I need to know where I'm going. And so I started seeking actual masters and gurus and people who could teach me and guide me so that I could find my way quicker, because I didn't know that I really had the proper heading, you know? But I knew that I wanted to help make the world a better place. I wanted to help build communities and build healing centers and places for people to come and explore their spirituality and their practices, and to teach the material that would be the most impactful for someone, right? Because there's a lot of material. Some of it's useful and maybe some of it's not so much. And like, I think the biggest change in the last year especially has been really getting over the fear of the word God. Like, even though I've been making these cartoons called Spirit Science for 11 or 12 years, there was always that, like, well, you can call it spirit, just supreme oneness, divine intelligence, da 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 da. And I still say that sometimes. I said it on this call, or this. It's not call, you know.
Yeah.
I do too many Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Did it on this. Said it on the podcast because it's true. Like a lot of people have, you know, different ways of describing that mysterious essence that we don't even really have a word for. Or as the Tao says, the word that you can say is not the representation of the eternal thing, right?
Right.
And so I've come to really be like, just get over that fear of saying God, and then embracing that fully and giving everything to it.
So I have a hesitancy using the word God because there's such a religious connotation to it.
Yeah.
And it feels so co-opted by Christianity, Catholicism to me, because that my family's Italian Catholic, and that's the only context I've ever heard it in growing up was by religious families. And so I've always had a hesitancy, even up to this day. This is the first moment where I'm talking to somebody who also has felt similar emotions toward that. So how now, and I think I just interrupted you, we're about to say this, but how did you start to understand your own fear of using that word? And like, what do you have any sense of where that fear came from? And then what?
It was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. Because in the New Age world, people would rather associate with the nebulous divine intelligence
as the universe.
As the universe, or the supreme power. The universe is telling me this, or, you know, and certainly, but then that actually kind of is insulting to the higher intelligence, because even by the standards of all the other world religions, the universe was created by that power, rather than is that power itself. Even in the New Age world, people love the Hermetic texts, the Hermetica and the whole of the Corpus Hermeticum, and even in that, it describes that the supreme power is its own living being, and it created the cosmos, which is in itself a complete and whole created being. You know, and then we are the created being within the created being by the created being, right. And they're all mirrors of each other to some greater or lesser extent. And it's for us to walk in within that holographic matrix of the created being to know the higher creator beyond it. And so, but it's the same as you, like in the growing up, God was the word that all the Christians and the Catholic and all these traditions would use, especially the Christian one that I grew up in. And I think a lot of people who are in the New Age world they've grown up in a similar way that I did, and probably you did, where we kind of grew up Christian or Catholic or whatever, and then we moved away from it because the orthodoxy didn't really feel right. So then from the new perspective, or the New Age perspective, if you say God, it's like, ooh, I prefer spirit. I prefer a different language. But true unity, we're not going to get to unity if we're living with that's still a duality, a consciousness between those two things. If you're like, well, Christians believe what they believe, and I have my, well, that's still a separation. And then a lot of the ideas, though, especially within the New Age and whatnot, is unity between all things, and unity consciousness, and living as a unified species, right? Getting over the division. So in order to do that, then we, at least this was my understanding, was let's just look at all of the traditions together and use all of the names, right? But because God is the most triggering, I've been using that more lately, because I'm like, no, I kind of want to stir the pot a little bit,
right?
Because if I can say something that might help someone get over their concerns with that word, maybe they can come to integrate those original teachings too. Like this last year, I started reading the Bible for the first time, which I knew I would do one day, but it took some time for me to get there and kind of acknowledge it, because I was like, oh, I want to read the Bhagavad Gita, and I want to read the Upanishads, and I want to read the Tao, and I want to read
the Quran and everything else.
Exactly, go through all of these books, and I kind of like was like, well, I'll get to the Bible later. But now that I've actually started reading it, I'm like, oh, I'm learning a lot from it, and being more comfortable in speaking about it and the different wisdom teachings that are in it, and making the appropriate connections to other traditions if it's called for. But you know, again, it's like it depends on who you're talking to. For a person who is Christian, if you want to make an impact in their life, it's not necessarily your job or our job to like, oh well, yeah, Jesus is great, but have you seen how he might be similar to all these other, But you can just focus on Jesus. You can just focus on what they already know and provide a deeper level of understanding just through being the embodiment of the teachings, rather than having to turn everything into a teaching moment. You know? Because that's really how we teach, is by living by example. Yeah. And I'm learning to try and put these practices into practice, or the teachings into practice, more so than trying to just explain them. I think it does more good in the world if the teachings are embodied rather than just spoken
vocalized or communicated. Yeah, you can communicate through behavior
exactly. This was the big challenge that I had, I think, with spirit science over the years, was I was talking about all of these things, but I wasn't always putting them into practice. And I would talk about how important it is to meditate, and I would go through waves where I was meditating every day, and I would also go through waves where I wasn't, but I think they would just assume that I always was, because I was the spirit science guy, that I'm just naturally the guy who's going to be making I do everything perfectly, because they watch the cartoons and they're like, well, the cartoons are great.
Right. Clearly, this guy must float from his bedroom to his bathroom.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm like, I'm not quite there yet. I haven't. In fact, I feel like I've wasted a lot of time in the last 10 years not doing what I was supposed to be doing. I should have been meditating every single day. I should have been more respectful of the different plant medicines. I should have been, all of these things. And I have had to come really kind of to repent a little bit and go to God with like, I am so sorry. I didn't even know that I was so going the wrong direction, and having my own version of what some people might be say as a come to Jesus kind of experience. The difference being that, in my come to Jesus, I'm not abandoning all of the love that I have for all the traditions. I'm taking all of it to heart, but it doesn't matter if I know everything and I'm not living it. It's more about, how am I living? Who am I being in every single moment? And am I walking in the right path? Am I walking the middle way, right? As both Jesus, Lao Tzu, and Buddha would describe, am I walking the middle path, or am I not? Because if I'm not, something's wrong. And you can identify that by the quality of the life and how you feel and how you experience and what you say and what you do and the experiences that you have with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful, man. Have you found that integrating psychedelics has allowed you to like retain information better? Like, do you integrate psychedelics with the intention of learning about a specific subject in a deeper way than if you were just sober and just had a glass of water that day instead of a quarter tab or a little bit of mushrooms? Do you ever enter a learning phase with that type of action?
A little bit. What's actually amazing is the greatest thing that helped me with memory altogether was the book Limitless by Jim Quick, because he provides instructions.
Was the movie based on the book? Bradley Cooper movie Limitless?
No.
Completely different, right?
Completely different.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah. But the Limitless book, he actually explains how to essentially have perfect memory by building a neural network of understanding. Like, even the best one that I ever thought of was the learning people's names better, because if you look at most people have a very difficult time when they see a face and they see a name, they struggle to keep those together for a long period of time. So then it takes them meeting multiple times. Sorry, what was your name again?
Yeah.
But if you can make a connection between the face and the name and a few other ideas of the circumstance, and you're kind of building a neural network of thought, then you have an easier time remembering them, because you're like, yes, I remember you because we were standing next to a fire hydrant and it was red, and red was your name or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I read.
That was your nickname.
There was a similar process to that was that I read in a book by one of the memory champions of the world who talked about taking the first letter of somebody's name
Mm-hmm.
and matching that to something in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's Rachel and there's a red fire hydrant, that's how you would remember it. Something like that.
There's some kind of
Sounds
connection
similar.
that you
Yeah.
can kind of piece it together.
Yeah.
So as far as the psychedelics goes, I would say absolutely. But then also sometimes like I'll spend 5 hours in a journey, you know, because anytime you have a good amount of mushrooms or LSD, like it's a marathon. You got to
Yeah.
plan the day
Yeah.
to be open and the right music and all of these things. But I might have an entire day of an experience and then not remember. I'm like, what just happened? Like, I know I feel changed, but I don't really remember where I went for like 3/4 of that,
Yeah.
you know?
Totally.
And so that can happen too. And, you know, lately there's a book that I was reading called The Tao of Physics. We spoke about it briefly earlier. And I have been, a microdose of LSD with that book has been very valuable in building the mental synapses for me of understanding quantum mechanics in a new way, because he's really explaining a lot and it's very heady. It's very difficult to understand. And so I have practiced a little bit with some psychedelics in helping me to understand it. At the same time, there are other times where I read the book and I'm just sober, I'll just, you know, kind of get a little more meditative and sit down and read it and reread it. So I really, and that still helps. I still learn the same material. I think that it's important to not suggest that the psychedelics are the answer for kind of any of these. Like, you can use it to learn more. You can use it to evolve your consciousness. You can use them to heal traumas. But if we just say that that's the way that you learn more or heal traumas or you know,
Right.
that's when we
Right.
kind of are once again putting the cart before the horse, or putting, you know, saying that is the way, when there's a higher way at work. And for a lot of people, psychedelics are not going to be the best pathway for them, right? Like, not everyone's going to drink ayahuasca. Not everyone's going to take DMT. At the same time, you know, over the next 5 or 10, 15 years, I think we're going to see a lot more of it becoming more of a mainstream thing. There's already ketamine clinics that are, you know, people starting to work with them therapeutically to heal their stuff. And for people who both have the drive to do so, the will to do so, that's a wonderful vehicle, so long as they're doing it in the right way. I just know from having done it, and you know, like even reading, you know, sometimes like there has been a time where I did the same thing, had a psychedelic, started reading, and 2 hours went by and I'm like, I've got through one page.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
my mind's going so many places at once. It's not so consistent
Yeah.
that you can, you every time that you go and read, you're just going to be enlightened afterwards.
Right.
There's
It's not
a
that
lot
type of tool. You don't use it as much as it speaks through you and guides you, rather than you choosing what you're going to do today and how this psychedelic is going to benefit you.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I appreciate them so much, and I wouldn't be where I am today without them. I think that my experiences have been so intense on both sides of the spectrum that I'm like, how can I be a voice for helping people find the moderation in it, so that it's used very responsibly and we collectively take it seriously? Because when people are just like, yeah, bro, like take the ayahuasca and you're just going to heal everything, and it's just the ultimate answer, and people kind of take it a little more casually, collectively, I think it does a greater disservice to the movement of it becoming more socially acceptable and respected.
Yeah.
You know?
That's why, you know, I didn't smoke weed until I was 18. And then I didn't again until I was like 25 or 26.
Wow.
And so I was never really a weed guy. I always had this weird thing about my lungs because I play basketball. And just the visual thought of smoke entering my lungs was always a huge turnoff for me. Now it's fun, and I can approach cannabis with a different mindset. But I saw over the years how weed has gotten positioned in society as an essential business. It was essential during the pandemic. MedMen was essential out here. The weed shops in California were as open as grocery stores.
Wow.
And there are thousands of people in jail for nonviolent weed crimes. Still. And I wonder, though, playing off what you just said, you know, weed was the first illegal drug to make it into the mainstream and become a capitalistic business.
Right.
Up next seems to be psilocybin and mushrooms.
Yeah.
And I worry about that because of exactly what you just said. What is the word? Commercialization of mushrooms would rip away the hundreds, thousands of years of practice and care and stewardship that people have put into that medicine, and how other cultures have guided that medicine through other people to allow evolution within their culture, and then that spread and it helped everybody evolve. And so I wonder that's what has me a little worried about that. And I wonder if we're going to hit a point where that ends up happening. And are you concerned about that at all for mushrooms or for anything else within that category?
You know, it's funny. It's a yes and no, just like with cannabis, because likewise with cannabis, I think it's better that it's legal than it is illegal. But I also think it's better that there's good education about it, so that people know what they're doing and how to use it. Because even still, I think it's better that it's legal today. But I think it would be far even greater if people knew how much value could be attained from having it and then meditating,
right? Or
using it with a sacred intention. Likewise with all of these things, people are going to be taking mushrooms, buying it from the store, and just having like a good time, and in many cases, it'll probably lead to a lot of benefit for people, spontaneous spiritual transformations and such, right? Just as we likely have both had. At the same time, I've had a lot of bad trips with psilocybin as well. And that's also, hopefully, as it comes out, there will be more respect. I mean, I think that's the best thing that we can both hope for and work towards, is that it is, as it comes out, it is respected. Like even if there was some kind of material or a class or something that could be universally, that could come along with it, so that it's like, all right, you're going to take mushrooms, please watch this video so that you understand the history and the da-da-da. But then there's a challenge with that, because then if the government is the one who's putting that out, you're like, I don't know if I would really trust.
They got to hire you and give Patchman full creative reign.
I would be more than happy to provide any service and support to that endeavor.
That would be incredible.
And likewise and so forth for all of the adjacent psychedelics as they become more legal and available, which I think is ultimately going to be a good thing, because it teaches people, regardless, even if people have a very bad experience, it can be a learning vehicle or a learning tool for understanding the intensity and the severity and the multidimensionality of the mind and the heart and the emotions and the interconnections of us all. And if everybody was taking more of these, they would start to recognize, wow, like they would start to perceive other dimensions of themselves and each other, and hopefully come a little bit closer to themselves and each other, and in doing so, come closer to what could be described as spirit. But even in then, like you said, like I don't really like using the word God, you said. And I think that's true for a lot of people. A lot of people might really get a lot of value out of the psychedelics, and they don't want to use the word God because they don't believe in God. The point shouldn't be believing in God. It doesn't really matter what I believe. And if there is a spirit or not, maybe all of those experiences that I've had, these come to Jesus moments and moments of divine revelation or meeting God in whatever capacity, maybe that was all just a way for my own imagination and my soul, if I have one, or my consciousness, right, to know itself a little bit better and come closer to wholeness. It could be all something that's just within me. From the perspective of an atheist, that could be very well true. And I don't want to insist that if you're an atheist and you're a really good person, I don't want to try and change your mind. You have a beautiful perspective. If you're living your life and you're doing good work in the world, you're giving to others, you're supporting charities, you're helping the homeless or the sick or the impoverished in some way, and you're trying to make the world a better place, I think you've got it right. Because that's what it's really about. It's doing good in the world, not so much about trying to make everyone believe the same thing. We don't have to believe the same thing, and it's likely that we're not ever all going to believe the same thing. But if we're making the world a better place, genuinely, by actually doing good things, then I think we're on the right track, because that's true virtue, right? And we should be striving for virtue and being virtuous rather than proselytization. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the value that you put in. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, dude. I love that. Thank you. As we near the end, I want to go rapid fire with a couple fun questions. You ready for this?
Great.
Okay, cool. All right. We'll start with this. This isn't rapid fire. You don't have to answer in 2 words.
One answer.
What is like one of the silliest, happiest, most joyful, laugh-fueled experiences you have had on psychedelics? And as you think of this, and interrupt me if it comes to you automatically. Mine I discussed on my buddy Nate's episode. It was my first time doing LSD, and we saw Jamie XX at Lightning in a Bottle music festival out here in California. And afterwards, they play the cleanup song at LIB. Have you been to that festival before?
In 2012.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So they play the cleanup song, clean up, and everybody walks around and cleans up like trash or water bottles or whatever.
That's adorable.
And Nate has a germ thing where he is weird about like touching doorknobs and that's fine. Everybody's got a tick. But when it comes to trash on the ground, that's like his nightmare. And so when they were playing the song, we both felt empathy with our environment and felt like we were being called to pick up trash. But he was like fighting this inner battle of not wanting to touch other people's trash. And we couldn't stop laughing about it. It was the funniest fucking thing I've ever experienced, was watching this guy wrap his like sweater while his pupils are as big as quarters, and he's walking around picking up water bottles like, I don't want to do that. But you're welcome. I'm doing this because I love the world and thank you for having me here and you're welcome. But I don't like touching other people's trash. And it was the funniest fucking thing, dude. And of course we processed it and talked about it later. And it was just a really fun, insane experience in that one moment in time.
That's so funny. I don't know that I actually have a singular answer for you, and so I hope I don't disappoint you with this answer. But
it won't.
But even if I were to try and describe the funniest experience or joyful and jubilant, experience with a psychedelic, I don't know that telling that story would do justice to the experience. Because just talking about it isn't the same as when you go through it. And you are
absolutely.
Laughing your ass off for hours. But I've definitely been there a number of times, and they're always just, it's like it brings your soul to, it doesn't even have to happen with psychedelics, but with, it might accentuate it. And I just know that I've definitely fallen, I've raffled for real. Rolled on the floor laughing for hours. With the joy of having a funny moments and experiences with friends.
Awesome.
In meaningful circumstances.
Yeah. Rolfling is the goal. That's a beautiful experience to have.
Yeah. But
okay.
I hope that was.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. Okay. If it became a requirement for a United States presidential candidate to have a psychedelic experience in order to run for president, what do you think that substance should be? If somebody wanted to run for president and it was a legal requirement to have a psychedelic experience, what type of psychedelic experience do you think would best benefit a potential U.S. presidential candidate?
I think that's a bit of a trick question, because if it was a requirement for them to try one, they should probably try them all so that they have the widest array of conscious awareness of the multidimensionality of the self. I think it would be inappropriate to just say, here, try DMT. Which kind? Because NN-DMT takes your awareness out into the field, and you participate in the multidimensional reality that's sort of all around you, potentially, and even other planets. 5-MeO-DMT plays your body like a singing bowl, whereas your body of consciousness kind of goes.
Yep.
And you don't have very many visuals. NN is all visual. 5-MeO is like this.
You just described my experience on it. So yeah.
Yeah. Ayahuasca, on the other hand, you are likely going to be throwing up, but LSD, maybe not so much. Some of them last 5 to 10 minutes. Others last 8 hours, right? So I think that if it was required, then the best thing would be a kind of like, here's the buffet. in order to get to this point here, you have to go and experience them all with the proper training and information instruction all along the way, so that by the end of it, they genuinely have a higher level of enlightenment instead of just sort of being like tossed into the ocean. Good luck if you can swim.
Sure.
And if you still want to be president after, good for you, right?
Yeah.
There would almost be like a
We
pathway.
hope you're a little bit better.
But I heard an idea recently, which is just that if there were actually more consequences for an individual running for president, then it wouldn't just be available to anybody. You know how they say the people who are best suited for the job are the ones who don't want it?
Yeah.
Right. So if there was a severe, like if you were impeached, there was a severe punishment for doing so, rather than, oh, you just lose the job, right? Like,
right.
You know, if you abuse the public trust to such a great degree that the collective body politic, or the body of society, says that they do not want you in their leadership position anymore, and you're gonna spend the rest of your life in jail, or you're gonna have a beheading, or some
be
kind
stoned
of,
in the town square.
Yeah, exactly. We go back 2,000 years.
Yeah.
If there was a punishment like that, people would take that job far more seriously, and then you would actually have leaders who would not abuse the public trust and not get impeached by doing the wrong thing. You know, there would be a lot more. I think it would increase trust, because they know that they're in a position where they have to do a good job, and they would not do things that would go against the collective interest of everybody moving in a positive direction. Because right now, I think the root of your question about, well, which psychedelic would they want to take, that comes from the feeling like the people in power are out of alignment with the people in general.
Yeah.
With the people.
That's exactly where it comes from.
Right?
Yeah.
And that maybe by having psychedelics, maybe they would get a little bit more into the awareness of how to be a good leader.
Yeah.
Right? Again, if multiple things were set up, you know, here's the consequences, here's the pathway to get involved, right? Here's what you need to learn, you know, in order to be a good leader, then it's going to reduce the amount of people who run for president, but it's going to increase the quality of those people tremendously. You know, the people who are actually virtuous would be in power, rather than whoever wants the power for themselves so that they can use it and abuse it and be selfish.
A much better answer than I was hoping for. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
That's great. Yeah, because it's not a question where you just say MDMA and be done with it. So I appreciate that.
Oh, that would have been a good one too.
But MDMA, I do think if there's got to be one. I mean,
so the president to be got to take MDMA, and then have a cuddle puddle.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, with a big furry coat and just deep bass music.
That would be.
Speaking of music,
that would be adorable.
You're a music fan, I would assume, a connoisseur of sorts. You probably have a wealth of musicians and styles that you've listened to over time.
That's very true.
I'm going to throw out different psychedelic substances, and I would love to hear if you've experienced any particular psychedelic, what your preferred music would be. Artists, if you have an artist to throw out, you could throw out a couple. If I say MDMA, you might say this person, or maybe this or this. Because I've got a few as well, and I'll just make it easy. I'll give you 4 or 5.
Okay.
All right. And if no music is the answer, that's also totally fine. If the answer is completely different, that's also welcome.
It's a tricky. I'll do my best.
Your best.
But it's a tricky answer.
It's tricky because it varies so much. It varies by setting, who you're with, what your intention is, the amount.
And just with time.
And time, sure.
I've made playlists before specifically for using with plant medicine or with psychedelics. And then later I'll go through a phase of, let's say even recently I'm reading the Bible. And then I'm starting to listen to these epic orchestras that are praising the Lord.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is all I need now.
That's pretty cool.
And I haven't touched the other playlist for a while.
Yeah.
But even then to describe what's on the playlist, I'm like, you really just have to listen to it. I couldn't name one artist because it's this blending of all of these different, these musical talents that I love and respect so much.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I'll do my best, but
okay. Gotcha. Ready? MDMA.
And, I think I would say something very gentle and relaxing and peaceful and maybe instrumental. Because I imagine if I'm having MDMA, I'm probably reading or being close with people I love, having a cuddle pod or something. So I'd be like slow, gentle instrumentals that is uplifting to the soul.
Awesome. Right on. How about Aya?
Well, traditionally, I've always listened to, I've listened to like the Icaros and a lot of those like Colombian music, lots of drumming and singing traditionally. So that's kind of the only frame of reference that I have with Aya. So I would probably say that, because generally speaking, I wouldn't do ayahuasca anyways unless I was at an appropriate place to experience it. I've also experienced it in perfect silence, which is also nice, but the music kind of steers the experience oftentimes.
Yeah.
The different music that you play will change the quality of the experience and what you see and what the nature of the visions. So yeah, I would probably say more of a traditional like Colombian, South and Central American music, that kind of stuff. And it's usually a setting too. Like it's not just you have the Aya and you have the music. You're also in you're in a maloka. You're with a shaman.
Right. It's not something you do on the couch at 8 p.m. at night in your apartment. You don't really do that.
Drink some
Let me have some Aya tea and put on, some bass music. That doesn't happen. Or maybe it does for some people.
I think the shamans who brew it, especially down in Central and South America, I think that they might, some of them might microdose it.
I have heard of that.
To some degree.
Yeah, sure. How about LSD?
Now, is it LSD by itself, or I'm mixing it with other things?
Let's go LSD solo.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I would recommend like my playlist, except again, there's a playlist that I created that has a lot of different music from like both the new age world that also mixes in with these like traditional praise hymns and songs of many, many different cultures from around the world. So it's a very colorful kind of rainbow, kaleidoscope rainbow of music, and it's always different. The whole playlist is like 20 or 30 hours. So I couldn't name any.
Is this on Spotify?
Yeah.
Can you send it to me?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called Feel Good Now.
Oh, that's amazing. We could even put it up in the YouTube on the description.
I love sharing the link for it.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
How about psilocybin?
Also Feel Good Now.
Also Feel Good. Right on.
Yeah. Or I mean, even with LSD and psilocybin and these ones, there's two playlists. One is the Feel Good Now, which has a lot of, but it's there's lyrics and there's instrumentals, but there's a lot of lyric songs in it. And then there's New Paradigm Flow, which is kind of the same thing, but instrumental only. So then it's depending on what you're doing, if you're wanting to just dance and stuff, you can play Feel Good Now. If you're trying to read or just set a mood and you have a microdose with a friend and you're playing chess or whatever, you could play the instrumental one, and it just kind of sets the background music, and it's a wonderful atmosphere.
Very cool.
Atmosphere creator.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. So with Patchman and Spirit Science, do you have a vision for the future? Do you have a grand plan, or are you kind of flowing now and continuing to discover whatever unravels within?
It's both. It's both. I have like my own vision of what I've seen. There's also the surrendering to a higher vision that I'm still receiving. And there is some collaborations and partnerships with others and wanting to support their visions, because certain groups like Arcadian American Farms, they've put together some they're just doing amazing things in the world, and I really want to support them in that and what they're creating. So it's a bit of both, right? Like I see some things for myself down the road. I see this long-term vision of wanting to create, the healing center and academy location. And then there's some of the collaborations that I'm working on with others who are just absolutely outstanding people and doing really, really important, amazing work in the world.
Cool.
And I want to help that to flourish too. And in some ways, those visions, may even fit together, So yeah.
That's amazing, brother. Well, thank you so much for cruising out. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to dip into before we take off?
I mean, we could probably sit here for hours and talk about so many subjects.
Oh yeah.
I'm so grateful for the opportunity to sit here with you. Thank you for having me. And I mean, if you have any last minute questions, I'm open for it.
I will call you and text you and bug you with many more questions. But I do want people to know where they can find everything.
The best place is just Spirit Science on YouTube or spiritverse.app. We have a free, like a social network, like a spiritual social network that's available for people. And we're building an online mystery school and academy for people to come and participate at higher levels, receive kind of higher levels of spiritual learning. And so we're doing a lot to try and facilitate community and bring people together, regardless of their beliefs, or, you know, if they're atheist, agnostic, spiritual, Christian, Muslim, whatever the pathway is. If they want to explore spiritual learning without the dogmatic judgment of, you know, some people are afraid to tell their parents that they're interested in some new age, you know, chakras or whatever because their family's Christian, or, you know, and there's some conflict there. If people are looking for a space to discuss openly their spirituality and hopefully in that find a higher or deeper resonance within them, Spiritverse is a place that we've created to do just that. Awesome.
Well, dude, I got to say, I love Patchman. I have so much love for you and the work that you do and how you do it and how you communicate it. You've helped me grow so much as a person and a being in this finite world we live. So thank you for hanging, dude.
Wow.
And thank you for coming out to the lair to kick it. That's the new name we have, by the way, everybody. You know the wolf. This is the wolf's lair now. And you were such a big part in bringing that name to fruition. So thank you, bro.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a treasure and a pleasure.
Absolutely. See you guys. And that's the show. Thank you guys so much for checking in to this week's trip with Jordan River. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel, Spirit Science. Check out Spirit Science on Instagram. You can follow my comedy channel, Brent Pella, on YouTube. And check out brentpella.com/shows for all of my stand-up dates coming up. I love y'all so much. I'll see you next week.